Hello and welcome to the Scotland Singing for Health podcast, produced by the Scotland Singing for Health Network. I am Brianna Robertson-Kirkland, and today I'm joined by Dr. Sophie Boyd, who not only leads her own Singing for Health groups, but has also been my right-hand woman organising all of the network activities. Let me tell you a little about this podcast and why we are talking about Singing for Health. Singing for Health groups support the management of a range of conditions, such as respiratory conditions, dementia, Parkinson's disease, and mental health concerns. In each episode of the podcast, we'll be talking to singers, singing group leaders, researchers, and medical practitioners to find out more about the benefits of singing and what Singing for Health activities are taking place all around Scotland. For our final episode, Sophie and I wanted to reflect on what we have managed to achieve, including the publication of our interactive map, and also some of the recurring issues our podcast speakers and network members have highlighted throughout our 2-year project. Let's jump straight in. So Sophie, can you remind us where this all started? Why did we start Scotland Singing for Health Network?
That's a good question, Brie. Always good to go back to the beginning. Gosh, where are we now? So we started 2 years ago. We put in a funding bid to the Royal Society of Edinburgh to fund a 2-year network. And that began in March 2021. Where are we now? Yeah, go. Time. Anyway, yeah. And here we are 2 years later, just about at the end of that project. And we wanted to set it up because we recognised that quite often Singing for Health practitioners work quite in isolation. So perhaps they work for a charity, or perhaps they work running their own groups, having been trained in different contexts. But we felt that there was a need to have some kind of unifying group network that would help people connect with each other, find out what each other are up to, but also how they might get involved with the research going on in this kind of big field. And yeah, that's what we've been doing. All these podcasts, all our work over these 2 years, just trying to make those connections, trying to facilitate some of that networking.
And we've been trying to do this during a pandemic. And so we wrote that application while we were in the midst of the pandemic, because we wrote that application way back in 2020 and submitted it in October 2020. And at that point, I think we were still thinking that things might be in person in 2021 and the pandemic would be over. And here we are 2 years later, and we're still feeling the effects of the pandemic. We've transitioned more to in-person activities, but there's still this kind of looming after effects, aftershock as a result of the pandemic, which a lot of our practitioners keep speaking about, and they're still trying to navigate.
Yeah, I mean, doesn't the pandemic do something weird to your sense of time? I don't know where we're at, but yeah, exactly. Naively then, in that beginning stage of the pandemic, just really thought, surely it can't last 2 years. But anyway, here we are. And I think what's important when we're talking about health-related activities is that a lot of the membership of Singing for Health groups are people who are continuing to shield and continuing to struggle to access some of the groups that they had been part of pre-pandemic. So while for many of us things are somewhat nearly normal or similar to how they were in the pre-pandemic, for many people in that more vulnerable population, things are absolutely not normal and absolutely still with so much anxiety and fear. And I think that's something we've been hearing a lot from our group members as well.
Absolutely. I mean, we've heard so much from our practitioners that they've had to adjust their practice to try and facilitate sessions that are suitable to people who cannot come into a space with lots of other people, but still really want to participate in singing. And because of of having to be in isolation for so long as a result of the pandemic, a lot of practitioners have come up with working methods to be able to make that work for them and work for the people that they are assisting. But at the same time, they're also having to manage people wanting to return to in-person sessions. They're having to manage their time, their a way of facilitating both. And the reality of the situation is that they are often doing this in isolation. If they do know other practitioners, and they're maybe able to get some advice, but for the most part, they're just trying to figure out the best way forward based on their own circumstances and their own ideas about how they can make it work. And so I hope that through the network, we've been able to offer some of that, some of the ways for them to make connections with others, some ideas of how they can move forward. I mean, earlier this year, we had a workshop dedicated to that, of thinking about how we navigate this transition period, moving away from completely online activities to more hybrid activities and in-person activities. And that was in February 2022. And at that point, we were still talking about, what is this going to look like when we move back to in-person? Can we move back to in-person? How does that function? How does that work? Like, it still was no clarity about exactly when or how things could move back to quote unquote normal. Although, of course, normal is now sort of a new normal, where we've got hybrid things going on all the time, and it looks very different depending on each person's situation. It's still a big question that we're obviously asking as a network.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's obviously, when the pandemic pushed us all online, it offered a way of, a new approach to working. And I think, having talked to various practitioners, there's definitely a feeling of not wanting to go back to online necessarily, now that we're kind of in person again, somewhat in person. But then you do see projects where online and hybrid continues, and it actually continues to be something really positive. So I know, Brie, we're going to be talking about the map that we put together, but I was really surprised when we were finding out about some of the groups across Scotland. There continues to be really positive projects using online work. For example, located around Skye and the West Highlands there, having online Kaylee, online kind of informal gathering as part of looking after, supporting people living with dementia. So that was really interesting to see that even now, where are we, the end of 2022, there continues to be that service provided. And when you think about those being quite rural communities, or communities spread out over quite a big distance, having something like an online meeting space for singing and music is actually really, really positive, and something that you can imagine will continue even if the pandemic does completely go away.
And obviously, we've, in some ways, as a network, we've really tapped into our ability to connect with people from very long distances as a result of the pandemic. So we've had meetings with groups in Canada who are working on Singing for Health research. We've been able to engage with a lot of researchers who are based all over the United Kingdom, discussing with them how they research singing for health, what their research looks like. In the before times, before the pandemic, probably what we would have done is had to have invited them to Scotland or go down to them, travelling far distances, to be able to have those conversations. But as a result of knowing that Zoom works pretty effectively, or any of these online messaging services, we've been able to have quite lengthy and detailed conversations with people working in this area to discuss Singing for Health, how it is researched, how it is valued as a practice, and look at what other examples are happening all across the world, not just Scotland specific.
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of shrinks your world down, doesn't it? When everybody can just appear in one Zoom room from over in Canada or over down south in London or wherever, and have people. God, didn't we have a podcast episode? Yeah, someone in Lewis, somebody in Edinburgh. You know, it's amazing just being able to bring people together. And yeah, I think in the future, when we look back on these pandemic years, we will see how it has facilitated some positive work practices, which we can only hope, continue building connections.
Absolutely. In fact, you know, one of the big conversations that we've had is the need for hybrid practice and developing mechanisms for hybrid, because there are people who want to participate and don't feel comfortable or are unable to come to an in-person session. And while we're still working on the technology, not us specifically as a network, but us as a society, trying to figure out the technology of how to make that work, and then how that can actually work in terms of being affordable for groups all across the United Kingdom. That's maybe things that we're still a long way off of. We don't know quite how the technology is going to pan out. But there are groups, so for example, Stephen Deasley's work with Luminate, where he's invested a lot of time and effort trying to facilitate hybrid practice and good hybrid practice to actually make it accessible for people who want to come to Singing for Health groups, but struggle with getting to an in-person session.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing what people have been able to do. And I think it also comes down to just being able to invest in that and being able to invest in good hybrid cameras, microphones, having a team to support that. I think, it's brilliant what some people can do. And what a difference that makes.
And investment being the key point, although we'll get on to funding and investment a little bit later. So you spoke a little bit about our map, Sophie, and one of our big outputs, if I speak in research terms, for this project was that we wanted to create an interactive map that mapped all of the Singing for Health groups as far as we could find all across Scotland. We believed that this type of resource would be absolutely fundamental for people all across the country being able to see where there are Singing for Health groups in their area. And not just people looking for a group, but also GPs, so that they could identify what Singing for Health groups were in their local communities, for community link workers to know about those services and resources, and for other practitioners to know what was already available in their area if they wanted to start their own group. So we started this version of the map back 2 years ago. We kicked off the whole project with starting our map, and we decided at that point to produce a beta version where we would showcase a small number of groups in a small local area to demonstrate what the map was going to do, what it was going to look like. And the reason why we did that was because, one, we wanted to see how long it would take us to actually map one of the local areas, and two, we wanted to be able to show this prototype map, publish that on our website so that people would be able to see what we were all about and what we were trying to achieve. So we did that. That was made available early last year. That was back in January 2021. And I think that's been a fairly valuable resource. We have received a little bit of feedback from community link workers who have said that they've been using that map, and people have gotten in touch with us as a result of that map being made available online. We've now completed the bigger mapping process. We completed that earlier in 2022. It's now completely available on our website, and we've mapped 85 groups that we know of all across Scotland, which I think I never thought that there was that many groups from everywhere, from the Highlands Islands Glasgow, Edinburgh, Dundee, Stirling, Fife, you name it, there seems to be Singing for Health groups everywhere. Were you surprised about that as well, Sophie?
Yeah, I think it's at least 85 groups. There's even possibly more. But yeah, it's a huge amount in Scotland, it's exciting. And perhaps we should talk a little bit about how we went about finding the groups.
Yeah, of course, because there has been mapping exercises like this that have been done in other countries. So in Ireland, we know that there was a mapping exercise that was done there, and they tapped into a resource. There was a resource that was already available in Ireland that they could tap into to attract groups. And we didn't have a similar resource in Scotland. We don't have a mailing list where we can contact all the groups and say, get in touch with us and let us know if you want to be mapped. So we had to take a slightly different approach. Sophie, do you want to talk us through what that approach was?
Okay, so we divided up all of the regions of Scotland between us, and it was a matter of, okay, what groups do we already know in these regions, and put them in a spreadsheet. Good. And what practitioners do we know who are part of the network, who have groups, find those groups, put them in the spreadsheet. And then it was just a case of getting on your search engine and just searching all of the variations of singing in health and that area. So different singing for different conditions, singing, well-being, health, choir, community choir, just all these combinations of word and conditions and that location, and just trawling through all of Google or whatever you're using, and just trying to find them. And then when we found the groups, we'd use the contact details available on their website, on their Facebook page, and get in touch with them to let them know that we're making this map. And would they like to be included? Are they happy to be included? Are all of their details correct? And I think what we found was when people did get back to us, it was hard doing this over COVID, because COVID definitely influenced what groups were able to be running or not running. So when I say we had at least 85, it was 85 that were currently running when we contacted them. But there were more that perhaps had been running, but were still on a bit of a COVID hiatus and perhaps will run again in the future, or just unclear. So yeah, that's why it's at least 85. But I think there could be more once we keep getting past this pandemic.
Absolutely. And that's actually why we have got a form on our website, so that if you're listening to this episode and you know that you're a group and you don't appear on our map, then please do get in touch with us through that form so that we can update our map, because we do want this to be an up-to-date resource. We do want it to be available to everyone so that they can see what groups are in their area. We recognise new groups are being established all the time. There's been a lot of work in training initiatives. There's been a lot of work in calling to action to establish new groups, which we'll talk about in a moment or two. And so we recognise that there's likely new groups that are going to be formed probably very quickly, because there is a real snowball effect. There's a real discussion about Singing for Health and an enthusiasm to promote Singing for Health and to start Singing for Health groups, which is really wonderful and powerful. But at the same time, we also recognise that our map could get out of date very, very quickly. And so a lot of our work that we've done initially establishing this map is going to be something that we'll have to keep going back to, keep updating, to make sure that it is fresh and make sure that it's capturing the most up-to-date information. We had to troll a lot of social media, and certainly on my part, I was trolling an awful lot of newspaper articles, just identifying where new groups have formed, but they didn't necessarily have a web presence, because not everybody does. Some groups operate through Facebook, and some groups operate just through their community hall, and people get to find out about them through a poster. And so there was an awful lot of legwork on our part, just identifying where these groups are if they didn't have a web presence, and then trying to find out the contact information. And I think we're particularly grateful to Alzheimer's Scotland, who gave us a lot of assistance with their groups that they're in contact with. They sent us a lot of information about the groups that had been set up by Alzheimer's Scotland, that were running through Alzheimer's Scotland, that they knew of, and providing us with that contact information, which really has helped us to track where a lot of groups are operating that are not necessarily available online. So we're so grateful to them and to others who also passed on information as well about groups that they knew that were operating in their local communities.
I would also say, if you are a singing leader who runs a group, just do think, how Googleable is my group? How easy to find the relevant information is it? And yeah, I think just it's just good to think about, because it's just disappointing, I think, on our end when we were doing this exercise and you're coming across a potential group and you think, it's maybe still running, but I can't find the contact detail, or it's hard to know when it meets or where it meets, or it's quite, it was tough. So do think, even if it's just a Facebook page, just to have something current that shows that your group's so active is, I think, really positive.
And we just spoke about this in the last podcast episode on social prescription, where Deborah, who's a community link worker, was talking quite a lot about how she's linked into her community and she works very hard identifying services and groups that are in her local community, but they are reliant on word of mouth. They're reliant on community link workers sharing information and also services sharing information. So we, as a network, will be able to link in with certain community link workers. So if you're struggling as a singing group leader, or if you're struggling as a service user trying to find a Singing for Health group in your area, if you're struggling to kind of identify those, then do get in touch, and we'll likely know somebody in our network or in our wider strand of contacts that we have that might be able to assist you in some kind of way. That's really, as a network, that's kind of our biggest ambition, is to network with others and try to provide those links across the country so that you can get the things that you need.
I think it was also really interesting finding these groups, how linked in they were with different community resources that were already there. So, for example, perhaps being part of a neighbourhood centre or a community centre, or in a church, maybe that's quite a community hub. And I think, just seeing how these groups operate within the community was really important.
We heard that in a recent podcast episode as well with
Claire McBrien,
who's from the Given It Laldy project, who she talked quite passionately about how forming these community links was absolutely essential to their project, to have that kind of person-centred approach. I think that's been a theme that's kind of resonated across all of the practitioners and projects that we have been looking more deeply into, is that they really do want to produce a Singing for Health group or a Singing for Health opportunity that is really person-centred and really person-led. Would you agree, Sophie?
Oh yeah, I think it's probably one of the most important things that's a strand across all Singing for Health practice, because of course it varies so much between who your participants are, and that might be the condition that they live with, or it might be the community that they're part of, or the city that they live in, that people just have different needs, or they want different things from their singing experience. So to have something that's really participant led. So who's there in that room and what do they need today from you as the practitioner? What do they need over the winter while you're doing these sessions? Or what are those particular needs of that group? And so just not having a one size fits all, this is the songs that I do and that's it. It's about having that conversation of shaping the songs that you're doing or the exercises that you're doing, or even the tone of the session, the atmosphere in the session. How kind of silly is it, or lighthearted, or how quite kind of grounded is it? People want different things.
And I suppose this leads into one of the topics that we've heard mentioned by a few of our network members, which is the question of evaluation. So how does a singing group leader evaluate what they're doing? How do they capture that evidence to be able to get funding to continue the work that they're doing, since so much funding is reliant on providing that evidence base? Sophie, I know that you recently had to speak on this topic at Comfort of Voices, so I wonder if you wanted to give us a recap or tell us a little bit about your experience of evaluation.
Okay, yeah. So Comfort of Voices was a songference, like a conference, but for singing leaders. I love it. That was organised, for Scottish singing leaders, hosted by Love Community Music, and a fantastic steering group. And I just did a wee panel discussion on what evaluation might look like, particularly through the lens of singing and health. And it's a big topic, it's really big. But it's a really important topic as well. So when we're talking about evaluation, that might be wanting to understand how your singing participants might be benefiting from the experience of singing in that group, or how the group might be impacting in their lives, or even just getting feedback about what they enjoy about sessions, or what they struggle with, or what they would like more of. We heard more egg and cress sandwiches, wasn't it? From one feedback from Memory Spinners episode. Yeah. Just trying to, I guess, empower people to be able to speak about their experience. And perhaps that's something you want to be able to kind of capture. I don't know what word to use. I don't like the word gather. It feels very sort of like you're taking their experiences, but just to listen to them, to give them space to talk about their experience, and to perhaps use those experiences in a productive way that will help you get further funding, or just to help shape your leadership or your facilitation of that group. And evaluation has so many different hats in what it might look like, and also how we might do it safely. So as researchers, what we're doing basically is kind of like evaluation, but in a very formal way. And we have to do a lot of groundwork in terms of ethical approval and data protection laws, rules, where those kind of interviews or questionnaires or any data you gather from people, where it's being stored, things like that. There's so many really important safeguarding rules in place. And so I think when we're doing evaluation with our groups, these are things that we need more, or perhaps singing leaders need more guidance on. That's what I would like to see in the future, certainly. But also, evaluation doesn't have to be a questionnaire that's left on someone's seat at the end of an 8-week block. In fact, we should look at the accessibility of things like that. If you're putting a questionnaire on somebody's, or if you're creating a questionnaire, again, it's something you're trained to do as a researcher, to know what kind of questions you can ask, what's safe to ask, how you word questions, and how and what you're doing with these answers when you've gathered them afterwards. But we could also look at evaluation as something I talked about, Comfort of Voices. It doesn't have to be something so formal as a questionnaire, especially, things like writing and reading can be intimidating for people and not always accessible. So we're just talking about participant-led sessions. Well, our evaluations should be participant-led as well. We should be working together with our participants to ask them, how would you like to feedback your experience of this? We could, for example, get some Post-its out and stick them all on a big piece of paper on the wall, kind of anonymously or as anonymously as you like, and gather a kind of capture people's feelings that way. Or we could, for example, write a song together, and kind of do some workshops to do songwriting. And that's something I did with my group as part of my research, was to create a song that was part of my data that captured the group's experience over the course of a year and what they wanted the song, their group song, to say about them and their group. And then that song ended up being not just sort of within my thesis, but it was something that the group could sing to other people. So they ended up singing it at a big health conference organized by the chief medical officer. So their song, their voices, their stories are getting sung out to this audience. And that's really exciting. And that's something that they led on and they made, and their voices are the ones singing it to this sort of medical audience. So yeah, evaluation doesn't have to be a questionnaire on a seat. It can be so much more.
And probably one of the biggest pieces of advice that we could potentially give if you are keen to evaluate your group or to use evaluation in some way is just to be transparent about your purposes. If it's that you're wanting to evaluate the group just so that you get a sense of what they're taking away from it, if there's anything that needs to be considered or adjusted that you haven't done yet as a practitioner, then great. Tell them that's your reasons. And maybe it doesn't then need to be as formal as having it written down. Similarly, if you're looking to get more funding, maybe explain that I want to be able to continue these sessions. I want to be able to get us more funding, and what funders are looking for is tangible evidence that I can point to. And that might be that, well, let's record a song. Let's record our thoughts, our feelings, maybe on a tape recorder, and just being open and transparent about that's what you're going to use it for. Similarly, if you're wanting to evaluate and then it turns out that you can use your evaluations for multiple things, again, being transparent with the participants that initially you had planned for one thing, but that there are these other opportunities, and are they okay with that? So often when I'm trying to evaluate what I'm doing or reflect on what I'm doing and just reflect as a person, reflect as a teacher, reflect as a practitioner, often it's that just having conversations has been the most powerful of being able to get feedback, of being able to understand. And I think that's what's speaking to your kind of message, Sophie, on evaluation, of engage in a conversation, and it's not a taking process, but rather it's a two-way street. It's a dialogue that you're both trying to find a compromise and benefits on both sides.
Yeah, definitely. It shouldn't be seen as a top-down, you're gathering their, I don't know, feelings, but really a conversation, a dialogue of a very you don't want to be a dominant person just kind of leading that, it needs to be a two-way thing. Yeah.
And maybe that is something that as a network we need to think about more, and think about what we should be doing as a network, what kind of guidance we should be providing. And if, again, talking about conversation, if that's even something that as a network that we need going forward. So our most recent episode was on social prescription, and throughout 2022, there's been a lot of conversation about social prescription. Our practitioners have consistently asked us, what is social prescription? How do we get involved? How do we let the people in charge know that Singing for Health groups exist and that they should be part of social prescription? They should be part of community referral processes. How do I make those links and connections? And I think way back we naively thought that we could just link in and as a network provide that kind of bridge. and say, well, here's how you get involved in social prescription. Here's how you can offer singing on prescription. We're the bridge, and this is how we can connect up the systems. And what we've realised is that that's a much more complicated question, because a lot of the structure and the format for social prescription is not yet existing in Scotland. Like, we're still figuring it out. What are your thoughts on this, Sophie?
Oof, it's hard, isn't it? Oh, yeah, when you look at the Scotland-wide scale and there's no joined-up approach, there's no wonder when people have asked me, so what's the deal with social prescription in Scotland? And I'm like, do you know what? I'm not entirely sure. But I'll try and find out. Because I know on a very small scale, in terms of my practice, I've been working with Deborah, the link worker who was on the previous episode, in generating a wonderful working model of social prescription, to use a slightly problematic term, but that's the term we're using, social prescription, a great working model of social prescription with my Singing for Breathing group. So Deborah's been there from setting it up to continuing, I think 4 years later, in bringing people in coming to sessions, in really having that community-centered, participant-led approach. And that's been really, really, I feel so privileged to have been able to work with somebody who's so good at her job and who's really just showed how well it could work. If everyone had a Deborah, if everyone had a link worker, because there aren't link workers in all areas, but if everyone did have one and it worked like that, then we would have no problem with social prescription. It would be really, it's like, that would be the perfect social prescription model, if, as far as I'm concerned, just to have people really rooted in their community and really engaged and excited and enthusiastic about those groups, those singing groups or those art groups or whatever they might be in that area, and to really be engaged with the person running them and how, and in dialogue with how they can, they can work together. But yeah, it's tough when you look at it, not just in a very, very small scale, in one region, in Denison and Glasgow, but actually in the Scotland-wide, yeah, it's tough, and there's definitely work to go on that.
I think what we've got to recognise, or what we have realised, is that social prescription as a concept, as an idea, isn't necessarily new, but building in those mechanisms to make it work, that is new. It's only been around for a few years. And each of the countries in the United Kingdom have taken a slightly different approach. And so that has really changed how each country is dealing with the social prescription or the community referral or whatever kind of terminology that we're using. It's really affected the way that they implement their models. In Scotland, we're building those mechanisms, we're building those structures, which is really positive to hear. But we also heard on that episode that each region of Scotland, each community in Scotland, has very different needs, has very different requirements, and what works in one might not work in another. And there aren't community link workers in every region yet. That's still something that we're building, that's still something that we're working towards. Now, that doesn't provide immediate help for those who are running Singing for Health groups right now to get the message out to the people that they need or to make those community links with their community link workers yet. But I think what's positive is that it's something that's moving, it's something that's building momentum, it's something that they are working on actively right now. And hopefully as a network, that is something where we can, and we are, making those connections. We're getting in from the ground and we're saying, hey, we exist, Singing for Health is important too, so please include us in those conversations. And maybe that can be a point for change.
That's so important, Brie, as well. Like, just having those conversations. I would say, though, that, and this isn't a new argument, that social prescription without funding behind it is a little bit difficult because people work so hard to run these Singing for Health groups, and it's often the practitioner who runs them who has to fundraise to keep that group going, or perhaps a small charity organisation that runs the groups. Always fundraising, always trying to raise money, just constantly. And it's really tough to have these social prescription conversations that talk about these groups are so important. These groups benefit people's health. They reduce the amount of hours they're at the GP contact time for. It takes pressure off GPs. It takes pressure off the health service. And that's so positive. But there is no funding from that public sphere to fund these groups. Although there is that recognition that the groups are important. And I find it slightly jarring, a little bit uncomfortable, I think it's just disappointing. I think that in an ideal world, the future of social prescription would be or singing on prescription, where singing groups are actually funded. That would be nice.
You're absolutely right, Sophie, and it's been probably one of the biggest issues that we have constantly heard from those in the network and constantly under discussion. How do we secure funding? Not for something new, but for something we are currently doing, that we do every week, that we feel is important, that we don't want to ask our service users for money for, because they need to come to these groups often. They feel that they feel that it is benefiting their health to come, and we don't want to ask them to pay even £1 to come to the group, because it should be a service that is on offer to them, that they can come to whenever they like. And that's been the hardest part of being a network and trying to figure out, well, how do we resolve that kind of problem? And again, like naively, I sort of thought, well, if we just build in the mechanisms for social prescription, if we just bridge those, then it will open up this magical pot of funding that must exist to be able to help groups maintain themselves without having to constantly search for funding or fundraise for their activities. And the reality is that doesn't exist. The magical pot does not exist. There is no pot of money at the end of the rainbow. It's a constant struggle on all services, health and otherwise, of trying to identify the funding that they need and then to give it to the services that they think are most in need of it. And unfortunately, Singing for Health does not seem to be high up on that list. And so it's trying to get that message out that actually, Singing for Health is really important and it needs funding. You cannot rely constantly on somebody volunteering their time, because a lot of our practitioners, this is their work. This is what they eat. This is how they pay their bills. This is how they eat. And they can't just volunteer their skills, their time to running all of these groups. They can't do it. They need to also safeguard themselves. They need to be able to fund themselves. And it puts a lot of pressure on them when they know that this work is important, when they form connections, when they're trained to do this type of work. And then to be constantly faced with the reality of, but I don't know if I'll have enough money to pay for the venue next week. I don't know if I'll have enough money for myself next week.
Yeah. And it's hard as freelancers as well, because you don't get sick pay. You don't get, that financial security. And so fundraising, it's really hard. And I guess it's thinking about how we safeguard practitioners as well. The stress and anxiety of having to fundraise to keep your group alive also turns into thinking about how you're going to be paying your own bills. And it's just such a burden for freelancers to carry. And again, it's something that they come up in conversation at Comfort of Voices, in that, you don't get sick pay, you don't get maternity pay, you don't get holiday pay. Just, holidays are important too for our well-being. And that's just, it's hard. It's so hard. and there is no answer. But I think a wider discussion around our safeguarding as practitioners is really important. Even if the financial security isn't necessarily there, thinking about how we do safeguard ourselves, and while there isn't financial security around sick pay, there are unions, musicians union and hardship funds that will help you, and it's important to know about those as well. I think certainly I didn't know much about hardship funds for musicians and freelancers. So yeah, just thinking about our own health and well-being, as well as the health and well-being of those people that we run groups for.
And we will provide links for the Musicians Union, for other unions that are integral to this conversation, and to the Musicians Hardship Fund. We'll link all of that in our show notes below if you want to find more information on those. Safeguarding is, again, it feels like we've had a number of big topics in that we've been talking about as part of the network, but safeguarding too, that's been something that's come up a bit more recently. But we have to recognise that a lot of these practitioners, they are working with vulnerable people. They're working with people who may have long-term health conditions that impact them, that may result in them disappearing from a group for a while, that can cause then a lot of worry and stress on the practitioner, who invest a lot of emotion, their emotional well-being, and as well as their time and skills in running these groups. And so practitioners, they have spoken to us quite a lot about that. They often are thinking constantly how to make sure that they are in touch with the people who come to their groups, how keeping on top of who is coming on a regular basis, who is missing, do I need to get in contact with them to find out if they're okay, how do I get in contact with them, forming these emotional connections with people, because it is very person-centred, it's very person-led. And the reality of that kind of labour, which is very, very intensive, is that the practitioner often takes a lot into themselves. And we've seen that. We've had conversations where practitioners talk to us about feeling burnt out and feeling like they need a break, they need a holiday, but their group needs them and they don't have someone that they trust to come and sub in. Or they need to build a connection with a fellow practitioner to build them up, but they might not have the funding to pay them. And that's kind of a really big issue that's part of Singing for Health just in general, but also for freelancers more broadly, where what do you do when you want to take a break, when you want to take a step back, but you feel you can't?
Yeah, and just feeling empowered to set boundaries, I think, is really important. So you're talking about how important it is to keep contact with people, to be in touch with your group members, and how much care you give as a person towards your group members, and the concern and care you feel when they become too poorly to attend. And it is just so awful when you lose group members, and it's so hard. So just feeling, I guess being able to acknowledge that and just having some feeling of support across the sector, I think, is just massively important. But being able to set personal boundaries where maybe you don't give out your mobile number, or you don't text back on weekends, or those. It's all obvious, isn't it? Those kind of things. But yeah, just feeling able to have boundaries, I think, is really important.
And obviously for each person, that's what their boundaries are going to look different. And that's something that is very important as well to acknowledge and point out, is that one person's boundaries might not be the same for somebody else. Now, that makes it very then difficult for us as a network to provide kind of specific guidance or give kind of specific advice on what to do. But it is something that we are very passionate about, and it's something that we are going to raise as a topic at the very final workshop that we're going to hold as part of the network. Now, you might be listening to this episode after that workshop has taken place, but the results or the outcomes of that workshop we will be linking on our website afterwards. So we have some major topics that we're wanting to discuss to get feedback, to be in conversation with everybody who's going to come along to that workshop, and to find out what their thoughts, ideas, potential solutions are for funding, for safeguarding, and for other topics that we have mentioned today as part of this episode. That brings me to my final question for you, Sophie. It's a question for me as well, which is the future of the network. So what would you like to see the network develop into going forward?
Oh, gosh. I think we've just made a beginning, It's been 2 years of working away at it, and then you kind of can't believe those 2 years are up. And suddenly, yeah, gosh, where are we going now? I guess it's been amazing building this momentum. I think that momentum still has a lot of distance to go. So just, I guess, continuing these discussions, these connections, just keeping that these relationships going that have been built up over these 2 years, and just listening to what people have to say, and it's so exciting, this work that's happening across Scotland. And it's not perfect, but it's great. It's so great. And just more of the same, more training opportunities, more funding opportunities, and more opportunities to be together as practitioners and to learn from each other, and to sing together would also be really nice.
Oh, wouldn't that be wonderful to sing together?
Yeah.
I think a big thing that I would love to see the future of the network is, we've done this mapping, we've formed these connections, we've identified kind of key issues that we might want to address in the future. And I would love to be able to tie into these bigger conversations on social prescription. I would love us to be to have a seat at that table, and to be able to say, how can we offer something like singing on prescription? It might not suit everybody. Not everybody's keen on singing, and that's okay. But for the people who are, it's a huge impact on them. And we want to be able to represent those people. We want to be able to offer that as something on a long-term basis that they can go to, and that they are secure knowing that that group's going to be available. And the practitioner leading it is secure in knowing that that group's going to be available, and it's not all on them to provide everything, including the funding, to be able to make that group function and run on a week-in, week-out basis. So I think that would be my big ambition, which is a huge ambition, but just having a seat at the table would be wonderful.
Yes, absolutely. I think people are becoming more and more aware. When you talk about Singing for Health, they say, oh yes, I've heard about Playlist for Life, or I've heard about singing in dementia, or singing in lung health, or oh, didn't that person on the telly do a good job about whatever choir they were visiting? Or people are becoming more aware. I think with that, it's just taking that awareness, that momentum, and just really building on it in a really serious way, that's saying this isn't just anecdotal. It's not just anecdotal. It's having real lived impact in people's lives and their abilities to live well with an illness. And so just really, really continuing to raise the profile in a way that is taken seriously.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sophie, for having this conversation with me today. And we're going to continue having these conversations over the remainder of this project, and for a while to come, because this network doesn't just finish once our funding is over. We're going to continue working on this because we're really passionate about Singing for Health and pushing a lot of the conversations that we've been having forward, and continuing to have those relationships with the practitioners, with the projects, with the groups, with all the wonderful work that is happening around Scotland. Thank you so much to all of our listeners for joining us on in each one of these episodes, for listening. If you would like to provide a comment, if you have any ideas on any of the topics that we've discussed today, please go to our Twitter and tweet us at ScotSingHealth. We've also linked that in the show notes. Tell us your ideas, tell us your thoughts, join us in this conversation. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you all soon. And that's it for Season 2 of Scotland's Singing for Health podcast. Thank you so much to all of our speakers and to everyone who's tuned in to listen. I also want to say a special thank you to Sophie Boyd, who has masterfully edited together each and every episode of the podcast. We are so excited to see so many people working on Singing for Health in Scotland. If you have further ideas about how to support Singing for Health or want to get more involved with the network, please get in touch with us. And so, it's time to wish you well and say a big goodbye from Scotland's Singing for Health podcast team. This podcast is produced by Scotland's Singing for Health Network, a project hosted at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, funded by the Royal Society of Edinburgh, and in partnership with the University of Edinburgh. For more information on our activities, please visit our website. Details are in the show notes. Samanaye, Samanaye.